And when you're looking at most things, I'm talking about properties, and properties is jobs. Confidence in the government is one big thing.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing. And sustainability, and basically, as I said, having that stability within a government that has a plan from a point of view of local housing and incentivizing developers to develop for the demand,
Yeah.
and helping to get through that bureaucracy as quickly as possible. And then also incentivizing people who want to buy houses, and they can do it. And it's been done in other countries already. And it sort of seems to don't look at successes in other places.
Well, I'm hoping this morning we can play some small part in changing the direction of that travel. And this is an invitation, really, to people who might want to be in some sort of panel, roundtable, think tank would be another way of putting it.
Yeah.
To bring that sort of awareness from these other countries. I mean, like you say, there are examples of how this can be turned around.
Yeah.
So just to recap then, so I understand it and how I can present this to our wonderful audience and community here. How you see it is that the politicians don't have a clear vision, or don't appear to have a clear vision. And then from an external perspective, when it comes to investors and global confidence in Portugal, that's a big shot in the foot.
Well, the one thing that especially larger investors will look at is the political stability in a country.
Yeah.
Because they're gambling. An investment is a gamble.
Yeah.
And when you're gambling, you look at, what's the movable things that can change the dynamic of my investment. And the number one thing is the political situation.
Yes.
And if the political situation is, let's say, even unsecure or unknown, that's not a good thing.
No, it's not, is it? And so they need to step up and provide that. Because, I mean, I suppose you could say the government and the society here has been very fortunate and trading on its global reputation of a peaceful, secure place to be, relatively low corruption, relatively stable politically. But that's changed, hasn't it, in the last year? And that's causing, you're saying, some doubt around the world.
Yeah, and absolutely. Like, we deal mainly with investors. Since I've come here 10 years ago, majority of the people I dealt with were international investors. And how would you say, they've made massive differences to people who live and work in Portugal. And because they've invested so much money. Because when the Golden Visa part was brought in, and the NHR, non-habitual tax residency, it invited people to come to Portugal and to invest in Portugal. And it outlined sort of a roadmap of what you got in return for investing in that. And this was huge. This was a massive, how would you say, it was a plan that was well thought out. And it did a great job over the period that it done. And it changed it in certain ways to try and suit the political dynamic as it changed, to try and get investment into other areas and so on and so forth. But I think even they were rushed. They weren't thought about, as in the consequences of when you invent something new. In other words, you say, let's get them to invest in this area. What happens is people create product to match a market rather than create product that's required.
Okay.
So, for example, you had people buying old buildings that were over 30 years old. They were making 15 square meter rooms in it and charging 280,000 euros because that's what qualified for the Golden Visa in this particular area.
And not necessarily the best idea, but one that suited what was available and how they could get into the country.
Exactly.
Right.
And it was that now they created a product that allowed you to apply for a Golden Visa.
Yeah.
But it wasn't really a product that was required in that area.
Yeah.
And now when they called an end to the Golden Visa in February, there was a lot of companies had invested huge amounts of money in the likes of Evra and around Evra in such projects, which, to be honest with you, I don't think there were good projects to start with.
Yeah.
But now it's not going anywhere. Those projects will never go anywhere.
Ouch.
What I believe they should have done was they should have asked people to invest in local housing projects.
Yeah.
And had from the requirement of what that area needed, and basically incentivize people to buy in this area for local housing requirement. And this is exactly what they did in Ireland. In Ireland, you had to do your golden visa, if you like, through a government approved development
Hmm.
that would supply local housing, and that was it.
And create positive social impact.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it wasn't that they were giving away free houses to the government, were giving away free houses. The people were still buying the houses, but now buying houses that were required, and they were getting investment from from foreigners to help alleviate the issues that were at hand in the local markets. But and I think actually that's where the answer should lie,
Hmm.
even still today, with regards to the housing crisis. I think that if they actually sit down and think about how do we incentivize people to buy houses,
Yeah.
and put confidence into the housing market, because another big question now is interest rates and inflation and so on and so forth.
And the
They all
global
have to be
picture.
tackled. Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
they all have to be taken into account. But this is that property goes up and down, up and down, up and down. This is not going to last forever. The inflation thing is not going to last forever. Interest rates are not going to keep going up, 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 up.
Mhm.
They will come back down as soon as things stabilize again. But regardless, you still have to plan for that in the future as well. So
Yeah.
you plan today, the interest rates might go down in 2 years or a year, whatever it is, but in 3 or 4 years they'll go up again as well for some
Yes.
next thing, you know.
History repeating itself, or certainly rhyming. Yeah.
Yeah, so you can't plan for today only. You have to plan in the long term.
Yeah.
And I think what they have to do there is to give tax incentives. And I keep saying tax incentives and tax credits, and it's not that they're giving away things for free. Basically, they're kicking the tax down the road. So, for example, a young couple, after buying a house, their first home or whatever it is, and let's say the house is €300,000,
Hmm.
they get a tax credit from the government over a 10-year period, which could be something like 40% of what they would pay in tax. They just get a 40% discount off it because they've bought this house. Similar to the way pensions schemes used to work years ago, is in that when you've done a pension, if you saved €100, you didn't pay tax on 50% of it or 40% of it. So you were actually being incentivized to save for your own future.
Yep.
It should be the same for your house. You should be incentivized to buy your own house.
And there's nothing like that.
Not that I'm aware
No
of.
thinking of that kind.
Not that I'm aware
I mean,
of.
their timescales are different, aren't they? Politicians don't tend to. I mean, they'll say they think long term, but really they need to be thinking about being re-elected. So their time scale will be according to the political time frame, 5 years, possibly.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that I think sense will prevail eventually, and we'll actually sit down and come up with good ideas. Like I know, like I've come from Ireland, where we had a huge housing crisis as well.
Yeah.
And Ireland went from the top country in Europe, as in growth and so on, to the worst.
Yeah.
In a period of 2 years.
Uh-huh.
But then turned it around in the next 3 years and went to the top again.
Yes.
So because people sat down and had to basically come together and think about how do we fix these.
Well, that's our invitation today, really, isn't it? I think it's certainly my invitation. Good morning, Portugal. Inspired by what you're doing here on a local level, I think you've proved yourself and your ethics and credibility with what you do. I think your insight and analysis of the situation makes a lot of sense. That there is a short-term thinking, and clearly, if you look at the golden visa and how it's been portrayed, it's a political football. So you had these products created that ultimately they were adapted to suit what was possible. They turned out to be not very good, and then the government could say, "Look, we're going to get rid of it because they're not very good products," and they created the environment in which those products were created in the first place. So we need some bigger thinking. I think we need some broader thinking, don't we? And different kinds of disciplines, mindsets on that think tank or that panel. Who would you choose to be alongside you as an advisor to the Portuguese government? I mean, is there any sort of progressive or in the most positive way thinking
Elon
going
Musk.
on? Well, if we can get an hour of his time over here, you like the cut of his jib, do you? And the way he's thinking.
I think he's a great, but he's also a little bit nuts. But I think
it often goes together, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah.
But I mean, we could ask our community as well. Who should be on this? Well, it's actually it resonates with what you said before. You've come to south of the river here to show the people who live here what a treasure they've got.
Yeah.
And they've said, "Oh yeah, actually, yeah, you're right. Let's do it." the whole country could do with that, couldn't it? With some foreign eyes, the innocents abroad as we are, some
Yeah.
of us not so innocent, but who am I to judge? But those fresh eyes in this country and different ideas, like yourself brought from the experience that you saw in Ireland. Who else could we have on this think tank, on this panel together? Let's host this discussion, and with respect and deference to our hosts here who make us very comfortable in this incredible country, offer that information and that insight to them.
Yeah, I think it should come from all sectors, to be honest with you. And I think people who are the ones that are probably the most important are the people who are looking to buy the houses. In other words, what would help them?
Yeah.
What do they need?
Yeah.
To basically inspire them, to help them, to encourage them to buy their own home.
Yeah. Well, that's what a great. I mean, it's back to basics, isn't it? That is the impulse, the first impulse, isn't it?
And I'm sure they have something similar here as well. But like in Ireland, we had a thing where the government would help people with their first mortgage and things like this, to help them to get onto that property ladder. That was always the biggest step on the property ladder, was the first one,
And it's a basic building block of a stable society. Going back to a stable society and politics, to give people that would be pretty smart, a smart move, right?
Well, if I was in power, for example, and I'm trying to get elected, it's trying to make as many people happy as possible.
Yes.
And I think by helping people's kids, for example, get onto that property ladder by bringing in positive political decisions and structures that sort of benefited the local population in getting into the house, I'd be very happy to vote for that guy again.
Sounds radical, but it's just so basic, isn't it?
It is very basic, and actually it's not rocket science. It really isn't.
Not, is it?
We don't need Elon Musk.
Okay, all right, we're withdrawing that offer to you, Elon. We've got this. Amazing. So who else can we think of that would make an exciting and interesting panel? The other thing I think to suggest possibly to our hosts here is that you're not about undermining them, are you? You want to help this country. You want to help them. And the pickle that they're in with these sort of protracted, unnecessarily prolonged planning processes aren't good for anybody, are they? And it's not like we want to take their jobs away. Their jobs could be so much better, couldn't they? If things got a little bit more redesigned and efficient.
I would say it's probably not an easy job to refix it or to redo it, because it's so historical.
Yes.
And it is very historical. And I don't want to sound like I'm coming over telling people, you should do it this way because we know better than you do. But it's not that.
Yeah.
It's experience that's brought us to a point that it's sort of, we started to understand where the issues are. And how to fix it, I'm not 100% sure, as in the bureaucracy side of it, because there is a lot of bureaucracy in it, and for a good reason, if you know what I mean. There's all these things, these technical documents and everything, they need to gather all this information. But I do know that some of the cameras right now are actually, they're trying to speed up their processes by digitalizing everything.
Okay.
So like it's sort of a tick box. You need this, this, and this, and this, and this, and this. Give me that, and so on, and then you get your planning.
Signs of hope.
It is, and I think it's just, and it's people as well. So it's, you've got people that are, how would you say, that they're in these jobs for a long, long time.
Yeah.
And they're set in the ways of how to do things as well. So, but I'm hoping that they could bring out some new ideas, because we need the investment.
We do. And this lack of confidence that is growing, and an idea that Portugal might not be a safe place to invest in. I'm not sure it's as true as some people might feel, but we need to address it. It needs to be addressed.
It is a great place to invest.
Yeah.
That's the reality of it.
Yeah.
And like, if you as an investor here, you look at the prices of properties in Portugal. I know people in Portugal think they're expensive, but spread it across Europe, as in a European price point, properties in Portugal are still very, very affordable. And it's the wage gap that's the difference.
Yeah.
And what they really need to do is to sort out the wage gap.
Yeah, so true, so that people can afford to buy their own houses.
Absolutely.
Yep. Thank you, Bobby. Great talking to you. Are you all right for a little bit longer to answer a couple of questions
Sure,
here? Fantastic. Sure. Okay, Matty is reminding me, he's such a stickler for timing. I don't know why that is, but I have my ideas. Question: with all these you got for the hair dad, How difficult? I think you might have typed this hastily, but how difficult or easy was it to get all the needed licenses, permissions, and what did they cost? Ballpark, not exact. That's a bit personal and private, isn't it? But I suppose the gist of the question is, and you've kind of referred to it already. It's not been an easy process, but it hasn't stopped you.
No, it hasn't. No, you when you make an investment like this, you have to continue and go through it. I won't say it was difficult. It was long. It was
Okay,
long,
right.
but there are steps there you have to follow, and when
Yeah.
you follow the steps, it should move along quicker. And how would you say we're learning as well on how to
Yes.
make things go quicker as well.
Yeah.
How to make sure we have the right people in place from the start, not from the end. You know, the kind of way. So,
Yeah.
had we had hired in this project management company 2 years ago, we would have been probably a lot further along than we were, because we were naive in certain parts of it as well.
Sure.
So, as with regards to cost, when you get planning permission for something like this, you pay a huge tax. They
Right.
don't give it to you for free.
Which, funnily enough, is the politicians' wages, is it not?
Well, actually,
Do you think they might listen to you?
it goes into the coffers of the municipality. It's a camera,
Okay.
and I have to say the Seychelles camera have been fantastic. They
Great.
really have.
Good to hear it. Good to hear it. All right. Well, that's great. And so that gives you an idea there, Matty, without getting the accounts out and giving you showing the invoices. Dougie is here as well, one of our co-hosts, a writer for
Hi,
the
Doug.
Portugal News. You've met Doug, of course.
Yeah,
haven't you?
yeah.
I spent my whole career building and indeed selling new houses, some of which were holiday homes in Wales. They had to be fireproofed at a certain time, didn't they? Those holiday homes in Wales. And I just heard you both say it's boom and bust in property. I mean, that's a reference to the cycles that the obvious cycles of being in property development, right?
The usual story was we had 7-year cycles and 5-year memories. So
yes, very good. Carl Hyde saying, welcoming me back to his manor. Welcome back to my neighborhood, Carl. Looking sharp today. Thank you very much, Carl.
hi, Carl.
From one Carl to another. And he has a question. Are there any, or will there be any finance partners that can help people get a mortgage to purchase at Haddad de Mayo? So addressing that and affordability and let's say a family wanting to buy a home, how is that a possibility here?
A very good point is just to go on to that, is that we've had about 5,000. And I'm guessing now it could be 6,000 or something, but people that have inquired about financing options and how much are they and so on and so forth. And what we found within the banks is that some of the banks will give pre-approval of the loan of a mortgage, but providing the property will finish within the 24 months of the CPCV, of the promissory contract.
Yeah.
And they'll give 30% up front. So subject to your being shown the capacity to repay the loan, and the usual bits and pieces that they look for when they're giving out mortgages, the banks will borrow up to 90% in total and 30% up front of the purchase price of the house, provided it's 24 months to complete. On this project here, we're about 28 months out still. So what we will be doing is, when we're in the 24-month time gap, we will actually have a financing broker here on site as well, but also that can contact people by Zoom. They're doing a lot of Zoom. They're actually based in Algarve, but it's a broker company, and they'll do all the stuff over Zoom call, talk to the people,
Okay.
to see how they qualify, explain all the how would you say, the P's and Q's,
The nuts and bolts of it, yeah.
Exactly. So and they do that all over Zoom, and then they can apply for a mortgage, and then if they get the mortgage, they can then put down, and we're doing a special deal for the local Portuguese market, where it's 10% on the promissory contract on the CPCV, and then there's a 30% from the bank reinforcement later.
Mm-hmm.
So it's only 10% on the CPCV on the promissory contract for Portuguese who are buying, and then the remainder on completion. So it's only a 10, 30, 60.
Okay.
And that should make it easier for the local market to buy.
There is an answer to your question there, Carl Hyde. And I mean, what's the worst thing that can happen? You've got to have a meeting in the Algarve with those people face to face.
No, they'll actually come here.
Wow. But I'm thinking, people, there might be an argument over it. No, we'll come to the Algarve. No, we'll come up to Seychelles. Either way, it's going to be great, isn't it? So there you go, Carl. Answer to your question. Thank you, T-Duck. Smash that like button, like that smash button. Oh, look at this. Somewhat possibly an eggy comment here, Bobby.
Oh.
Oh, if they fix the wage gap,
Yeah.
most NAs and North Americans and Northern Europeans wouldn't be here. Okay, that's a fair point. Portuguese would be buying their own homes, and we'd be traveling to Moldova finding something to complain about. Now, that's a rather jaundiced and cynical way of putting it, but that's progress as well, isn't it? That's what happens.
But I think, look, this is a big conversation, and I would say that in parts he has good point there.
Yeah.
But if we go back to, again, I can only go back to Ireland. I remember, like, my dad, when I was a kid, my father worked for €80, or £80 it was, a week when I was like 12, 13 years of age. It's not that anymore. You know what I mean? But it obviously, but the country itself has to grow up, and so the salaries have to grow up. But I think also the social security part of and how people are paid here,
Yeah.
It's a little bit misleading. And I'll explain it. And if someone says, "Oh, I'm on €1,000, I'm only on €1,000 a month," they're actually on nearly €1,500 a month. It's just that because the taxes and the social security are normally paid by the employer.
Yes. Yeah.
And
the hidden costs.
The hidden costs, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's that part of it. And actually, again, I think how they work that system, it decentivizes employers from employing people.
Of course it does. No question.
Because I think it's something like 34% on top of what someone is paid.
Yeah.
You also have to pay to the government because you have your part of the social security, their part of the social security, plus the taxes and so on as well.
12, not 40 months. Yeah, 40 months a year as well, isn't
14 months, and then all the holidays and so on.
Yeah.
And then basically as well, the rules around employment. If you want to let somebody go because they haven't performed or whatever it is, you have to pay the compensation and things like this. So they might think it's great to have all these protections for the workers here,
Yeah.
but actually it goes against the grain of people wanting to hire them, because they're so much tied into rules that they're locked into. In one of the projects that they brought out with the golden visa was that if you hired 10 people, if you created a company and hired 10 people, we'll give you a golden visa. No one did it.
For some reason,
because they looked at the rules around hiring 10 people.
So, no, it's all right. I'll just buy somewhere.
Yeah,
thank you
exactly.
very much.
So, but the thing is, if they had, I'm not saying that you should be able to hire and fire at willy-nilly, but
it's about balance, isn't it?
It's absolutely, and I think this is one thing that's held the wage gap from rising up. It's the structure of how it's done.
Yeah.
And we also have